All right. Welcome, everybody. Can you hear me? Sounds good? Good. This is going to be a new experience for all of us, right? So my name's Tim Sandage. I'm a senior security partner strategist. And as some of you may know, we just launched the ATO on AWS program today as an official Amazon Partner Network program. So we're going to talk about, what does this mean for you as customers? What does it mean for partners? How can we enable partners to get through some of these regulated workloads? And then again, why is this really important? How many of you guys work in a regulated workload or need to get through some kind of regulated compliance workload? Fun stuff, right? So that's really why we created this program. It's really, we've heard from our customers for years now. I'm getting close to my 7th year at AWS. And when I first got here, we were working through getting AWS through these certifications. That's what I specifically came in for, was to help us get through our FedRAMP program. And then on and on, we keep adding things because our customers ask for it. They say, hey, I need help, making sure that I can run regulated workloads. But more and more in the last few years, it's come down to our customers need to get these types of certifications on top of AWS. And so we started working and building a program around security automation and orchestration. And so it's really combining security operations and DevOps to make sure that we, automate and accelerate the capabilities. So that's what drove the development of this program and ultimately our launch today, is we're really accelerating security and compliance. We're trying to make sure that our customers can get through these regulated workloads faster at a lower price point and be able to exceed the expectations of whatever compliance responsibility they have. Where, as you can see here, whether it's PCI, it's FedRAMP, it's DoD, SRG, whatever the case may be, we want to be able to enable and empower our customers and our partners to get through these processes. So this is really a partner-driven process. So that's the other thing that's really important. We had a lot of questions. How many people went to reInvent this last year in November of 2018? So we really launched this program as the concept at reInvent, but one of the misunderstandings about the program is that people thought, hey, AWS is helping me get my ATO. They're bringing in resources and capabilities and so forth, and they're gonna help me. In some cases, we even had customers say, hey, will you pay for my FedRAMP ATO? And that was like, well, that's not what the program's about. The program's about empowering, but it's also about empowering our other Amazon partners that can actually help you treat some of these regulated workloads. So it's really partner driven, meaning that we provide a lot of training, guidance, opportunities to say, here, this is how you can best do this. This is how you can accelerate it. But we also develop a lot of integrations, making sure that, hey, if you need an endpoint solution and you also need a SIEM and you need vulnerability scanning, we've already got those pieces stitched together with leveraging, some of our major partners like Trend Micro and Saint and Splunk and so forth. We've already kind of worked with those partners to make sure that we've got those pieces stitched together into what's called infrastructure as code. How many people have heard of infrastructure as code? So it's really, that's one of the things that really drives us, is making sure that we're building secure and compliant artifacts and making sure that as it lays down and the code is laid down, that you're actually meeting the compliance vertical, whether it's FedRAMP, DoD, whatever the case may be. And then we're also there as our team. What we've done is we've stood up this team with a group of prior FedRAMP, associates as well as DevOps personnel inside AWS that can help guide you with some direct guidance and education and so forth. And then we can bring in the partners and make sure that we have the qualified system integrators that are actually helping you build this and coaching you and working with your team so that we can accelerate, getting through the process. How many people maybe heard some of the Smartsheet presentations that were today or yesterday? So that was one of our proof of concepts last year, was we brought in several partners and we were actually able to take Smartsheet from zero GovCloud presence to fully FedRAMP assessed in 90 days. So we're actually handing off the package to the FedRAMP PMO office in a 90-day period. So that was really one of our big successes, where it was like, how can we get this done and get it done quickly? Because this is really why we're doing this. How many people have ever been through FedRAMP or a DoD, SRG, or PCI even, As you can see, these are the averages. I mean, it's 18 to 24 months for a lot of these. And that's really if you're really motivated, your organization has everything in line, and you have the right staff, and you have the right consulting or SI partners that are engaged. It's really a long process. And so we want to make sure that we figure out ways to reduce that, and we figure out ways, because we still have customers that have a couple of different perspectives in this space. What we want to work with is customers like, hey, are you doing this because it's a business decision? I've got to be able to drive revenue for getting my product through FedRAMP or DoD. Well, we can accelerate that. But if you're really wanting to also, hey, maybe I want to do a bake-off and I want to figure out what are the right partner products and solutions, maybe I want to look at different SIM products, or I want to look at different endpoint solutions, we can also help you too, but obviously realizing that's sometimes what really, pushes the line on how long this takes, because we do get customers that say, well, we probably want to replace some legacy equipment, and we probably want to do some evaluations. But again, all of those factors is what drives these timelines. So really, that's what our team's there for, is to kind of, break down the minutia and say, hey, we can get you done in 90 days, whether it's FedRAMP, DoD, or whatever the case may be, because we have these predefined deployment kits. We already have partners and SIs and solutions that are already intertwined and put together. Or if you want to actually say, hey, I already got an endpoint solution, I want to be able to stitch that into the existing architecture or into the net new architecture, we can also do that. But again, when you look at these timelines, that's what we're really trying to drive, because really in this day and age, especially in the cloud, security is a business enabler. We need to get in front of the business and say, hey, how do you want to do this? How do you want to do it securely? And how do you want to maintain it securely going forward? And so that's really also one of our other objectives and goals. So again, I've already asked a few times, with the FedRAMP process, how many people have seen these charts, the different timelines that this is really published by the FedRAMP PMO, and it really talks about the difference between an agency ATO and a Jab ATO. Normally I would ask, who knows the difference? But obviously we're not asking questions in this, but really the agency ATO is really, that's where the federal agency is sponsoring you to go through the process, but you still have to go through all of the exact alignments that the Jab program office says, okay, all of your documentations, everything still has to follow the same flow, versus if you go Jab, you're going directly to Jab, and you basically, the end state is the difference is you get a provisional ATO if you go Jab. If you get an agency ATO, you get exactly that, you get an agency ATO. But we took their spreadsheet off of the PMO website to figure out really at the point that somebody became FedRAMP in progress or FedRAMP ready, what's the average timeline that it's taking to get through that process. Now keep in mind, this is people that have already built some part of their configuration, or they've already started, building their FedRAMP journey before they get to these timelines. The reality is for an agency ATO, it's still 15 months to work through, this capability. And so and obviously that's the average. There's some that have gotten through much quicker. There's some that have gotten through much longer. But then for a Jab ATO, it's 18 months. And so one of our goals in this program is to cut these in half, is to make sure that not only are we accelerating the build document and the capabilities of getting you ready and capable for going through the ATO process, but we also want to work with the program office like, FedRAMP or DISA and make sure, hey, how do we make sure that we're giving, whether it's us or that's the partners that are giving clean, crisp, direct, secure packages so that we can accelerate this process. But again, what did I say earlier? This is a business, security needs to be a business driver. We need to be driving, a secure and capable business forward so that, ultimately, if you're a partner or you're a customer on AWS, you're able to obtain these, these ATOs or these certifications quicker and faster so that you can go to market. And so that's what we're really trying to drive here. So the benefits, this is obviously one of the things that we really, when we set out and started working on this a couple of years ago, especially when we were developing the security automation and orchestration capability, we really wanted to focus on, if you've got to do something more than once, let's automate it. Let's make sure that we're leveraging, the innovation and the capability of the cloud. So we really wanted to reduce effort because, I bet, let me show of hands, how many people have too many employees in their organization? Right? Nobody. That's one of the things that, you think about it, especially in the cybersecurity space, we don't have enough security engineers, enough security analysts, enough people that not only know how to do this type of work, but then have enough time to do it and do it right. So we've got to make sure that we're leveraging some of these advanced technologies like infrastructure as code, or as we like to call it, compliance as code, making sure that we're reducing the effort that it takes to do this. So if you've got to deploy a server, let's make sure that we're automating that deployment. Let's make sure that it's done through automation, so we're reducing that effort. So we want to also make sure that we're building end-to-end automation, because one of the great things about the cloud is that you can fail fast. It's like you can actually innovate in the cloud and say, okay, let's try these configurations. Let's see if these systems and services work together. Let's stitch this stuff together and see if it works. Well, if it doesn't work, we can tear it down and redeploy an optional deployment very, very quickly by using automation, versus the old way. If I'm standing up a server and I'm having to lock it down based on a CIS, benchmark manually, it's going to take me a lot of time if I make a mistake to roll that back and to roll out a net new good version of that. So we want to make sure that we're automating that. And then the other thing, we're bringing in the Amazon Partner Network's got one of the biggest partner networks that I probably have ever seen, that really have defined capabilities. And we're actually worked with a lot of these partners. As you probably noticed in the announcement today, we launched our program with 24 partners. And the reason why they're in the program, and there's multiple more that will be added to the program, but we've worked with this and said, okay, if I'm going to use a vulnerability scanner like Saint, or I'm going to use an endpoint protection like Trend, or if I'm going to use an Amazon machine image that's hardened to a standard like CIS, we've already went through and worked with those partners and made sure these are actually fit for purpose. They're fit for purpose to treat this set of 25 or 30, or in some cases 60 controls in an 853 deployment, whether it's FISMA, FedRAMP, IRS 1075, whatever the case may be. We've already went through and worked with these partners to make sure, hey, I can now, instead of having 50 plus security tool sets that you may or may not have in an on-premise deployment that say, hey, this is how I do my IDS, this is how I do my SIM, this is how I do my endpoint protection. We now in the cloud can orchestrate and automate a lot of this with about 8 partners in AWS solutions, and basically get you through this process very quickly. And then obviously we've worked with some of the top SIs and system integrators, so we've got consulting partners like Coalfire, and I see the team from Kratos sitting in the audience and so forth, that have really helped us, as leading, 3PAOs in this space, really have helped and guide us, that they brought in their lessons learned of how they've got other organizations through, FedRAMP or DoD or different things like that. So they've actually are qualified integrators of not only the compliance vertical, but also of AWS. They've got deep experience of implementing, services and capabilities in AWS. And so then the byproduct of that, and so therefore, if you're sitting here in the audience today and going, okay, but I'm also a partner of AWS, I also think that, my solution and capability can support and help some of these compliance verticals. That's the other thing, is it part of the program is to making sure that we not only help other SaaS or PaaS providers that have great tool sets that are trying to, sell into the federal government, get through some of these regulated workloads. But once they get that, like as you've heard about Smartsheet getting their, going through their FedRAMP process and potentially having their ATO, well, now they become a partner in the program potentially, because their tools and services can help treat, or they can help orchestrate some of the ongoing compliance of other partners and other customers in this space. And so that's where we really, the program then evolves from, we're supporting you as a customer, as a direct consumption, to where you now become a go-to-market partner of the program and say, okay, how can we now leverage your system and service to enhance other partners and other customers in the AWS, community, and making sure that, we have ways to say, these are now how your solution can be fit for purpose to help for these other verticals, as well as, getting some, public designation in our Amazon Partner Network. You can now make sure that you have that designation that's like, hey, I'm an ATO on AWS partner, and I can help solve this XYZ control set, whatever that case may be. So I kind of already talked a little bit about this. One of the things that really drives this program, as I said, is that automation. We're at a stage and a time period of technology is that, we've got really, really complex configurations. We also have, simple, configurations, maybe the way you provision users and so forth. But again, all of it should be automated. We can now truly codify this, but we also want to make sure that we're building in validation into that code, because ultimately, not only are we focused on automation, we're focused on certification. How do we get people certified, and then how do we keep them certified? How many people have ever been through an audit? Probably most of us, right? We go through the audit, the auditors come in, we get everything, we scramble for 90 days or whatever, waiting for them to show up. We work through the audits, we work through the findings, and then we high-five them as they walk out the door. And then we kind of go back to, normal day-to-day work, and we start letting processes, get laxed, or we start having, things that are wavering inside the organization, or we even stop doing things that maybe is an in-scope audit element. And so therefore, the following year, that same auditor is going to come back and re-audit you. What do? For 90 days, it's all hair's on fire, and we're running around trying to get everything built back up. That's the other part of this program, that we want to make sure as we automate you, we're automating validations, or what we like to call guardrails, that say, hey, we need to enable the business, but we also need to stay secure in these compliant swim lanes, essentially, and say, how do we keep you certifiable or certified continuously? So we make sure that we build in continuous audit capabilities and continuous compliance capabilities, so that we really have ongoing validation gates. That's where the DevOps side of this comes in, is really, how do we leverage things like CI and CD, continuous integration, continuous delivery, and then overlay that with something that we like to call continuous risk treatment, where we're actually, as things change and operate and evolve in your operational environment, you actually are continually validating, hey, this is still fit for purpose for, SC19 within an 853, FedRAMP control set. I'm still maintaining that control set. And so that's what we want to do, because ultimately, what if I keep driving back to? Security needs to be a business driver. We need to empower the business, that they know that they can be secure and that they can stay secure. I mean, how many people have seen the breaches and the different security, problems that we've had in society, whether it's public sector or commercial space? How many people have gotten free credit reporting for years, probably, because you're subject of somebody else's breach? That's what the goal of this program is too, is to get people secure, maintain, and then also do it through automation. So again, kind of to close this piece out of what the overall program is, again, the goals, we're trying to create a verifiable compliance. We're trying to create continuous verifiable audit and compliance capabilities, so that you don't have those manual processes. We're trying to accelerate that path to production. We don't want to hear about this 18 to 24 months to get through a compliance vertical, and we don't want to hear about these 90, 120 day scrambles to try to get recertified. We want to eliminate those things. We obviously want to improve the compliance and security posture. I mean, that's the ultimate goal. I mean, I'm tired of, waking up every day and hearing about the next breach or the next ransomware that we're hearing at this city or that city, because again, as citizens, whether it's state, local government, or it's at the federal level, that's affecting us. These inefficiencies, these areas where we're missing in security and compliance are affecting us as human beings. And so we want to try to eliminate that as much as possible. And then obviously demonstrate that these controls are really supportable. I mean, one of the things that really makes AWS and Amazon secure is that's priority zero in Amazon. I mean, security has always been. If you think about Amazon.com, the legacy of that is that they've been an internet defender for 20 plus years. And so all of that capability of saying we always have to be focused on security, that's job zero. Therefore, the other parts of compliance, the result of security, becomes something that just gets taken out. It's actually fed out to you as an organization. So that's where we really are starting. This is really the technical side of it, of how do we do that? How do we actually elevate some of these processes and programs within security and compliance? How many people have heard of the risk management framework? So this is our version of turning the risk management framework on its head. If you think about the risk management framework as is, it's about control selection, it's about boundary selection, it's about manual configuration, it's about manual assessment, it's about manual monitoring, and then it's about manual assessment or reassessment at the end of the 6-phase cycle. But if you think about it from a cloud approach of a risk management framework, we're starting with pre and compliant provisioning configurations. So we're starting with infrastructure as code that have already been built for purpose against the security vertical. So whether it's 853 or it's PCI or whatever the case may be, we've already done that as compliance as code. We've already defined the boundaries, and so therefore, where we're starting at is at that resource provisioning level, because then we can go directly into configuration management, because the other piece, again, that really hurts security and compliance is change control. I mean, how many people have run ITIL or done, some of those different change control processes? They're elongated, they take time, they end up, really slowing down the production and the deployment cycles. So, we want to automate that change control. So that's where we really make sure that we focus on that DevOps life cycle. And then also in the cloud, I mean, one of the things that we tell customers all the time is you can log everything in the cloud, and you should log everything from the minute you open your account. Make sure that all of your logging configurations, whether it's CloudTrail, config, VPC flow logs, whatever the case may be, you can log every activity. You can see if a human or an API does something in your environment, and you can now start creating things like simple notification to say, hey, this went wrong, that went wrong, positive, negative, whatever the case might be. So at the point that you're actually getting to governance and compliance, you're a consumer at that point. You're not building governance compliance in there because it was already codified at the beginning. Now I'm just doing reporting. I'm doing, hey, look, boss, here's my metrics, my security metrics. It says this is what we're doing correctly, or this is some areas where we need some improvement, or hey, that last code deployment, we made a change that kind of took us out of compliance for some AC control or whatever the case may be. But you're actually just getting that as an output now. You're not necessarily going in as a compliance or security professional, inputting those details and so forth, or trying to document them in your system security plan or whatever the case may be. Because ultimately we're trying to get you to the stage 5 of resource optimizations. The promise of cloud was you were going to save money, you were going to do more with less. You were going to be able to actually leverage all of these things like automation and serverless and all of these, containers, all of these great things. But more often than not, we see customers, especially in the regulated workspace, that they get bogged down with, okay, I got to figure out how am I going to get this thing called cloud through this compliant workload. So that's the piece that we're really have created this process to make sure that we can look at ways that on resource provisioning, we can actually lay down the secure code, and so how many people have heard of CloudFormation templates or CloudFormation as a service? So this is really the building blocks, is it, that we've worked with. As I've said, we've worked with our service teams, we've worked with our partners, to make sure that all of their resources are deployable through a CloudFormation template. And then we even make sure that in a lot of cases we have customers and we have partners like HashiCorp, where we use their Terraform service. And so we have these, CloudFormation and Terraform templates that they can actually be deployed to deploy these, environments. In some cases, like I said, we referenced Smartsheet, and we had, a talk with them today and yesterday. It took 4 hours to deploy their base FedRAMP architecture, leveraging this capability. So the rest of that, the rest of the time that it took was stitching in their application, because some of the lessons learned that we've had in these programs is some applications are not always built securely. They're not always codified securely. And so when you lay down a hardened Amazon machine image like a CIS benchmark, all of a sudden stitching maybe a less than secure application into a hardened OS becomes a little bit problematic. And so you end up having to spend a lot of time at that application level in a lot of cases, trying to balance that and then trying to make sure that you can, run scans against that to make sure that it's going to be fit for purpose for the environment. The other piece is we want to make sure in this provisioning model that we're looking at how do we leverage things like auto-scaling. So auto-scaling is really the ability to scale up and scale down. Instead of like we do in the traditional model on, on-prem or in a data center, we buy resources for a 3 or a 2 or a 5-year life cycle, so we're over provisioning, we're over committing to all of these resources, and you don't necessarily have to do that in the cloud. And so this is another way to shape some of that resource provision to make sure, hey, I'm going to deploy auto-scaling in my code, so as I deploy, I'm going to deploy the minimum necessary environment that I need to get my workloads operational, but then I have that capability as if I have a peak time of year, or I have a peak time of a month, based on a state and local government or a federal agency, whatever the case may be, I can auto scale up and auto scale down. So I have that capability to make sure that I'm improving those pieces. So this is kind of an automated architecture. This is a sample of really how, we've stitched a lot of these pieces together and said, how do we pull, a Trend Micro and a Saint and a CIS Amazon Machine Image and a, Barracuda and YubiKeys, and stitch all this together and making sure that we're leveraging this with, all of the AWS services that make sense for the deployment and the regulated workload. And then also making sure that we're using 2 AZs, that we have availability zones, because now we also are thinking about what are the continuous, operations, or our DR strategy that we've got to make sure that we're building into these architectures. And so this is all the stuff that we've codified. This is the output of the code of this is what we're really calling our general support system, that this is your baseline infrastructure in the customer, account that's actually now going to support that application and that capability for your compliant workload. So then really, at the next phase, like I said, we go into that configuration management. And really the configuration management is driven a lot of times off of a couple of our core AWS services, is services like config. Config can actually tell you the minute a resource was launched and how all the different ways that resource is interconnected, and then also when that resource was terminated. And you can then know all the changes, all the different, restarts, all of the different capabilities, and you can tie that in with CloudTrail, and you can tie that in with System Manager, that makes sure that the systems and services are patched to the right level. And then, as I said, you can create simple notification services and notifications that says, hey, if this or that, or even Lambda functions in a lot of cases, if these executions change positive or negatively, I want to be notified. Maybe I even want to auto-remediate some things. And it's like, hey, if somebody opens an S3 bucket to the world and I've, created, a rule that says, hey, there's critical data in this S3 bucket, can never be open to the world, I can have an auto correction that's actually set up in my configuration management plan. So I can make sure that, yes, a human did open this inadvertently, it shouldn't, because I'm using some kind of data identification or tagging or whatever in that environment that says that can't be open to the world. And therefore I can actually show that it was closed back down in, hopefully minutes or seconds in a lot of cases, so that we don't have an exposure or a threat. And then that goes into the monitoring piece. One of the things with CloudTrail, you want to make sure that CloudTrail is running, but you also want to make sure certain configurations are set in your deployment, like, log validation. Log validation makes sure that if somebody nefariously comes into the environment and scrapes a bunch of logs because they were doing something bad and dumps them, if log validation's turned on, therefore it makes an auto snap of that environment and says, hey, a nefarious or an accident, maybe it wasn't nefarious, somebody scrapes logs and deletes them, you actually have that chain of custody to say, hey, I've got a clear notification. So all of that can be codified. Same thing for lifecycle, how long should I keep my logs? Where should I, store my logs? Should I encrypt my logs? All of that is codified, but you set that all up in that provisioning step, but now that's where you're able to pull it out, and that's where you're able to use it and resource it properly and make sure that, it is maintaining that security and compliance capability, the stuff that you're really trying to make sure that, that you're hitting. The same thing with running CloudWatch. You can set up different alarms, you can set up different thresholds, and make sure that those two are working in concert together so that you're constantly monitoring not only performance, but you're monitoring, security capability and compliance adherence. And that, like I said, this is where it really gets us to that utopian state of where no longer in this type of an architecture or this type of deployment is security and compliance and governance an input. There's not a human that says, okay, how do I have to interpret this? How do I have to go in and look at these things and digest them and say, you know, what needs to be documented in my system security plan? What needs to be, you know, what are audit artifacts that I need to create? What are screenshots that I need to create? When you're running this type of an automated deployment and compliance capability, all of this stuff is being created real time through your automation deployment. Now all of a sudden, your CloudFormation template becomes, you know, this is my aspirational build or my blueprint. Like if you're building a house, we always start with a blueprint. What is my aspirational way I want my environment to look? But that's what an auditor uses to audit you. They say, hey, this is what you intended to build. Now I got to see if you did build it. So that as built. But because we now have an automated, validated, and certified deployment, we're going to see that we almost have this virtual MD5 hash, you know, that says, hey, this is what I intend to build, and this is the result. So we're able to just pull that out by leveraging some core services in AWS, like Security Hub that integrates a lot of our services in AWS, but it also integrates a lot of the partner solutions and so forth. And then making sure that we can, you know, also leverage all of the encryption capabilities, because especially in federal and state and local and CJIS, there's a lot of areas where we've got to use defined encryptors, you know, whether it's FIPS 140 validated products or whatever the case may be. We have those tool sets and capabilities inside of your account that you can leverage and make sure that they not only get implemented on that provisioning stage, but they're maintained, and so you can actually use them as an output of your overall security and compliance and risk posture. Because I said this is really, you know, the ultimate output. This is where security becomes a business enabler, because now we're allowing our customers, we're allowing our partners to really build secure, compliant, reliable workloads that got validation gates, and there's solid, you know, CI/CD, you know, change management and so forth. There's, you know, repositories like GitHub built right into the environment that says, okay, I know where all my source code is coming. I know where all my changes are coming through, you know, different integrations, whether it's Puppet or Ansible or whatever the case may be. Now all of a sudden I actually get to optimize these workloads. And again, going back to, if I start with auto scaling, you know, I'm able to actually integrate and maintain that auto scaling capability throughout. And now all of a sudden I can really look at, okay, what are the ways that I can resource optimize? You know, can I start leveraging systems and services that maybe save me money? Can I migrate off of databases that are, you know, maybe, you know, cost prohibitive down to, you know, something that makes sense? So now all of a sudden your humans as well as your resources are freed up to the degree that you can actually start thinking about these pieces instead of, okay, am I secure and am I staying secure and am I going to pass that audit? I mean, those are the other pieces that we want to make sure that we literally leverage that capability and ensure that we're able to get you to that optimum state. So these are just kind of some of our metrics, you know, really, you know, kind of driving back. Why are we doing this? Why are we, you know, why is this something that we're focused on? And I think I said it earlier, and if I didn't, I apologize, but really, Amazon, as its core, is customer obsessed. I mean, you know, we do things because our customers ask for it. They say, hey, you know, I need to get through this. I need to do this thing. I need this service. You know, in my 6.5 years here, like I said, you know, I've constantly, usually the conversations with customers and partners, they call me up and say, I've got to be compliant with X. You know, how do I get through? And, you know, and usually then it's, I got to get compliant with FedRAMP, you know, whether it's FedRAMP High or it's FedRAMP Moderate or it's DoD, like an IL4, IL5, whatever the case may be. So really just within the building of this process and building out, you know, the security automation and orchestration capability, and then really identifying how can we best serve our customers. This is some of the metrics that we were able to, you know, draw together based on just the proof of concepts. As you can see, just this year, we've actually been, you know, since the start of the year, we have 25 authority to operates that we've helped customers or partners get on top of AWS. One of the key factors too is that we're actually, as a cloud service provider, as an infrastructure cloud service provider, we're really the leader in the space from FedRAMP. I think Teresa's keynote this morning talked about that we have 69 FedRAMP ATOs on top of AWS in both our East-West and our GovCloud. So that's pretty powerful. It really goes back to that messaging of, we're here to empower our partners, we're here to empower our customers, to make sure that we're hitting the mark. Like I said, when I started here, I came here because I had to help AWS get through our initial FedRAMP, and so again, that was a driving force. But now we see the pendulum really swing the other way to where our customers need to make sure that they're leveraging and inheriting the parts and the pieces that they can off of our FedRAMP or off of our DoD or PCI, whatever the case may be, so they can build their own. And so, our goal this year is to really make sure that we're exceeding expectations and getting customers not only through these ATOs, but getting them done quicker, faster, and the consultants in the room may not like this, cheaper, so that we can, figure out ways to drive down those costs. Because, ultimately, if you think about it, the reason why, and I pick on FedRAMP because it's probably the one that is talked about the most, the idea of FedRAMP was, let's create a process where we can certify once, use many. And when we started in this program, 6.5 years ago, it was really, focused on that. But it's, and it's like anything else, people look for the way that they're going to build revenue or make money off of these things. So it's become, to some degree, cost prohibitive for our smaller partners and for our smaller organizations, because the cost of entry of some of these certifications are also, pretty daunting and pretty, costly. So that's the other rationale behind how do we accelerate, optimize, and then reduce the cost, but also make sure that, we're not hurting the market, we're not hurting partners, but making sure that we figure out ways to, get some of these really innovative products, to the government. That's what FedRAMP is about. How can we be able to sell these innovative products to federal agencies? The same thing for DoD. How can we get innovative capabilities to our warfighters and make sure that there's services and capability that meet these compliance verticals? So these are really the some of the metrics that we've already proven out. We have a pretty lofty goal to get these programs and so forth. How many people saw the announcement that our formal web page went up this morning? It got launched during Teresa's keynote. So there's a blog post out on our Amazon Partner Network that talks about ATO on AWS as a formal partner program. There's a formal, I was going to say, well, I'm not done. You guys are all clapping. But there's a formal blog out there. It can tell you, as a customer, how you can consume some of these services and products. But if you're a partner that, has capabilities and has, opportunities you want to get involved, it also tells you how you can get involved as a partner. And so if you just go out to ATO on AWS, you'll be able to find our blog on the APN network blog, and then that'll link you directly to the website. We're also having a launch party tonight at a place called Bar Deco over here on 6th. If you want to join us, and we can talk more about this awesome program as well as compliance, because I know everybody likes to socialize around compliance. And the last thing, this is really one of the things that is that we leverage. If you are a partner or a customer that needs support with FedRAMP, this is and this is up on the website. It's actually been turned into an automated form. One of the driving forces for FedRAMP, and it's really, really challenging right now, is you've got to have an agency sponsor, or you've got to have a path to JAB, meaning you are leveraging the Connect program and so forth. So we use this form, and if you have interest and you need support, you can go onto our website, you can fill out this form, it'll come to our team, and we'll be able to help you. But really the driving importance of this form is really make sure that you either have an agency sponsor or you have a path to get into the Connect or the JAB program, because you can absolutely go and work yourself through the FedRAMP process, but as I said, it's a pretty costly process right now. and it still won't get you to that promised land of getting an ATO and FedRAMP if we don't figure out ways to make sure that you have those agencies in that path to Jab. So a couple of other breakouts. If you want to hear me talk again, I'm doing almost kind of a Mythbusters presentation tomorrow, you know, talking about one of the big questions that people are always going, hey, the federal government says my application that gets installed in their AWS account needs to go through a FedRAMP accreditation. That's a busted myth. You only need FedRAMP if you're a SaaS or a PaaS product, that you're actually a hosted product. So it's if you want to hear about more of these crazy myths that are out in our industry, you can come listen to me again tomorrow. There's also some great talks on continuous mitigation and diagnostics. You know, we already had the achieving compliance session earlier that talked about our smart sheet and how we did the proof of concept. And then there's some great security automation tools that Brad's going to talk about. I believe that's tomorrow. And then container security, you know, that's one of the things that we're constantly seeing now is people are saying, hey, how do I deploy containers? How do I do, how do I get things certified using serverless and so forth? So some other great sessions that are out there that are related to the stuff that we're working on or teams that we're working with. So with that, I thank you for your time. I'll be out in the hallway if people have questions and want to continue the conversation.